there, my name is Ksenia Smirnova, and now we will unveil the top news of recent days. The UK is ready to transfer to Ukraine all the assets of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation frozen in the country in the form of loan, taking into account the fact that after the end of the war, Russia will have to pay reparations. The Guardian reports, citing British Foreign Secretary David Cameron. Under Cameron's plan, when Russia pays reparations, the loan will be repaid, giving Moscow access to its funds.
There's also the opportunity to use something like a syndicated loan or a bond that effectively uses the frozen Russian assets as surety to give that money to the Ukrainians, knowing that you'll be able to recoup it when reparations are paid by Russia. That may be a better way of doing it.
The minister also added that Great Britain strives for maximum unity with the countries of the G7 and the European Union on the issue of transferring Russian assets to Ukraine, but London is ready to take this step without a collective decision. The Guardian calls the strength of the plan, that is, does not formally provide for confiscation of assets. Russia will ultimately gain access to them. At the same time, the publication emphasized the plan has an obvious weak side. If Ukraine does not win on the battlefield, then Russia will not agree to pay reparations. How to return the money is unclear. Journalists note that this is the first time Cameron has spoken so openly and in detail about this proposal. In their opinion, this may indicate political support for the plan in the US, but not in the European Union. In Great Britain, after the start of the war, the assets of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation were frozen in the amounts of about £25 billion, but this was not officially reported, The Guardian clarifies. At the end of January 2024, European Union countries agreed on a plan to transfer profits received from Russian assets frozen in the European Union to a special fund, from which money could later be used to rebuild Ukraine. Mechanisms for implementing this plan is currently being developed. According to Bloomberg, the United States expects that the G7 countries will be able to decide on the use of these assets of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation at the summit in June. At the same time, as the agency wrote, the G7 countries have not yet reached a consensus on how exactly Russian assets should be used. However, they all agree that the frozen assets should remain off limits to Russia unless it promises to help rebuild Ukraine. Well, Russia should probably pay for its aggression with real money, but we are asking you to let this money go to Ukraine and not be used in other countries for consultations and forums on the restoration of Ukraine. The United States can allocate $200 million from Pentagon reserves to help Ukraine. The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden is studying the possibility of allocating about $200 million from the funding of the United States Army to support Ukraine. This is reported by Bloomberg with reference to informed sources. They say the White House is debating whether President Biden's administration could use roughly $200 million in Pentagon reserves for immediate aid to Kyiv. This is certainly not the $61 billion currently stuck in Congress, but much less. But in the current situation, any help will be useful to us. And we are very grateful to the White House for pursuing opportunities. It will be especially interesting if Ukraine can make significant progress before Congress can make its decision. Although why wait? Ukraine is now reaching them in the Black Sea. 25 Russian ships have already been sunk, destroyed the fifth parts of one of the most verbally formidable fleets in the world by February 2022. And this was done by the Ukrainians, who now have almost no fleets of their own. The funds allocated by Washington can be used to pay for critically important weapons, materials and other equipment because Ukraine is facing a shortage of artillery ammunition. According to one of the interlocutors of the publication, the final decision has not been made yet. Today, Joe Biden will address both houses of Congress, urging the House of Representatives.
The world is waiting for American leadership to remain steadfast and help protect lives and preserve freedom. This truly contributes to confidence and motivation.
And let me remind you that earlier, the heads of 23 world parliaments appealed to the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, to put the law passed in the Senate to a vote. All politicians are convinced that there are votes for him, so you just have to put it to the vote and the decision will be made. It is rather unfortunate that our entire nation suffers because of the political decisions of one person. The Russians hit the Odesa port. Yes, it happened yesterday, but I want to talk about it today because new details have appeared. First, as is already known, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, were in the city at the time of the attack. Secondly, the most importantly, the world reacted to this intimidation of European politicians. For example, the chairman of the European Council, Charles Michel, wrote on the X social network that this is another sign of Russia's cowardly tactics in its war of aggression against Ukraine. This is reprehensible and below even the Kremlin's playbook. The European Union's full support to Ukraine and its brave people will not waver. Today, the statement was confirmed by the Speaker of the European Commission, Eric Mamer.
It's not really for us to decide whether it's an attempt at intimidation or any other thing. Ask the Russians. What is clear is that whatever they are trying to do, they are failing to do so. It is clear that we will continue to stand by Ukraine, as we have done since the beginning of the conflict, and that such actions will not deter us from this support to Ukraine. So I think that's absolutely clear.
And by the way, once again, I draw your attention to how the Russians' mass media reacted to the information. When the information about the explosion appeared, they wrote that they had hit an important infrastructure. After the information appeared that Zelensky and Mitsotakis were there at the time, they wrote that they showed that politicians are in danger. And when it became known that the explosion occurred 500 meters away, politicians began to call it a provocation. Russians always do that. At first, they brag about their actions, and when it becomes clear that these are crimes, they either say that there's no evidence or that is a provocation. According to the version of Russian mass media, the atrocities in Bucha and Irpin are staged. Any Russian who doubts this can be imprisoned for discrediting the Russian army. However, in reality, all the atrocities that continue on Ukrainian territory are committed by the Russians. And the events in Odesa once again confirm this. And they also confirm that it was not for nothing that the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for 2 Russian generals who were involved in the shelling of Ukrainian infrastructure. And finally, I will say one more phrase. Kyriakos Mitsotakis is not the first world leader who was in danger from Russian missiles. Earlier, the Russians already hit in Kiev when the presidents of African countries were there. They hit the capital when United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was there. US President Joe Biden walked around Kiev to the sounds of alarms. And believe me, this is not forgotten. But the worst thing is that we Ukrainians are already used to this, no matter how scary it sounds. That concludes today's video, and thank you very much for watching us. Stay updated, comment, like, and subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support really matters. Thank you again, and goodbye.